Welcome to the Codcast from Commonwealth Magazine. I'm Michael Jonas. The Straight Pride Parade in Boston has come and gone, but its effects are still being felt. The effort by a handful of right-wing provocateurs to shake things up succeeded, but probably not in any way they intended. The fallout from the parade has served to expose a rift developing in the region's criminal justice system. 36 counter-demonstrators who showed up to protest the Straight Pride Parade were arrested and faced various charges. Some are violent offenses with allegations of assault on police officers. Others were nonviolent charges of disorderly conduct or resisting arrest. When some of the defendants appeared in court last Tuesday, things got interesting. The Suffolk County DA's office said it would proceed on the charges of violent offenses, but prosecutors said they were looking to dismiss nonviolent charges against 7 defendants, with most agreeing to 8 hours of community service. The problem? Boston Municipal Court Judge Richard Sinnott said no, he wouldn't allow the cases to be dismissed. That struck many as a sharp departure from his role as a judge, with Sinnott wading into territory generally reserved for prosecutors. Things got even more interesting on Wednesday, when a lawyer for one of the defendants tried to read from a 1991 court decision to argue that Sinnott was out of bounds in overruling the prosecutors. The attorney, Susan Church, read from the case, telling the court that decisions not to prosecute are, quote, within the discretion of the executive branch of government, free from judicial intervention. A back and forth with Sinnott ensued, in which he told her he would hear no more of the legal argument. When she continued, despite his warning, Sinnott ordered Church taken into custody. She was handcuffed and held for about 3 hours before the judge ordered her released. Susan Church has a lot of courtroom experience, but that experience was a first. She joins us on the Codcast to talk about it all. Thank you so much for being here, Susan.
Thank you for having me.
So it was an unusual day, to say the least, in court for you. Can you just sort of give us a little bit of an account of what happened? First of all, you were there defending a client that was facing what charge?
She was facing charges of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. But I was there on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild, who has historically provided free representation to protesters as part of their mission statement of the organization. And I was in charge. It wasn't like a charge, but in charge of the lawyers that day and organizing representation. And I was assigned this first case that had gotten called. And it was a little tense because there was police officers in the courtroom as well as protesters. And the day before had been very tense from what I had read from media accounts and heard from other lawyers. So I walk into the courtroom, and this is the first unusual thing, and my client's standing there at the microphone, and the district attorney is talking. So the judge started the case without me, the lawyer, even though I had entered my appearance in on the case. So I was a little surprised at that. It's unlawful. She's entitled to her lawyer to be in the room. It's really ex parte communication to have just the prosecutor on one side of an argument. But I didn't say anything, and I went to the microphone where I'm supposed to stand, and I'm listening. And he's making what I believe is a tortured and honestly incomprehensible argument that a statute, the Victim Rights Statute, somehow affects the separation of powers, which is a constitutional right.
The judge is making this.
The judge is making this argument.
Sinnott.
And he's going on and on and on with the prosecutor, asking repeated questions of the prosecutor. And eventually he turns to me and says, okay, it's your turn to talk. I actually asked if I could talk while the prosecutor was looking up some information. He said no, and so I was quiet.
And then wait, has the prosecution already said that they'd like to see this case, her case dismissed?
Yes. So I've recently listened to the recording. The first word she said was, we are null processing this case because the charges against this defendant lack particularity. So the police report...
Which is just kind of a general term for saying they're going to use their discretion or...
Right, so you don't even have to explain why
Right.
you give a no process. Prosecutors are in a habit of giving an explanation on no process, so in case they want to prosecute later, they have their statement of the reasons on the record, and that has legal ramifications later on. But she did give a reason, and the reason was that this police report was completely nondescript as to what each individual person did. It was just a mass arrest report without describing what my client allegedly did or did not do. Mm-hmm. That's a perfectly valid reason to null process a case. And I want to be clear that the charge was null process, not dismissed. There's been a lot of confusion in the media about that. I believe that there's legal authority both ways for the prosecutor to do it, but no one I've spoken to, no prosecutors, no defense attorneys have ever said that the judge had the authority to deny a null pros. It's
Right.
it's unheard of. It's
Because there's kind of this distinction that they are two paths usually to the same outcome, but one of them.
the judge has to accede to it.
Right.
I disagree.
Right.
And
But even if you buy that argument,
even if you buy that,
this
we
wasn't-
weren't there.
This wasn't
exactly
in
right.
that category.
Exactly right. So I start my argument, and I start by trying to debunk the idea that this statute that the judge is citing somehow relates. It doesn't. And then I try to cite the law, which this is really telling. This is the law that's really on point. So my trying to contradict the victim rights statute, no big deal, right? Like, because he knows that's not a valid argument.
It's not
he must.
valid, in your view, for him to invoke that?
No, there's no remedy provided in the statute. There would have to be a remedy provided in the statute for that to have any weight whatsoever, and there is no remedy provided in the statute. So, but fine. Like, he likes that argument because it helps him with the police, right? That's why he supported that argument. But the argument that he cannot get around, that he cannot challenge, that he has no leg to stand on, is that there are cases exactly on point from the Supreme Judicial Court. As soon as I start reading those cases, he starts interrupting me. It's notable that, and I was interrupted. I haven't counted, but in listening to the tape, it was at least 3-4 times I was interrupted. At some point in time, I say, Your Honor, I'm trying, like, I was interrupted so much I couldn't complete my argument, and I couldn't make the arguments that I wanted to make or the statements I wanted to make, or especially read this one particular case into the record and the citation from that case, the quote from that case.
Which was essentially to make the point that
He didn't have the authority to deny a null pros.
Right.
In fact, it wasn't even denying null pros. The government had already entered the null pros. So in all likelihood, there was no case to discuss because it should be gone. Anyways, and he says, like, I said, you keep interrupting me, Your Honor. I'm just trying to make my case. I just want to cite this case. And I knew that I was going to stop as soon as I was able to get this one case on the record. And the reason I was so insistent is because I have a legal duty to, A, zealously represent my client, but B, to make a record for an appeal. So if this was going to go up on appeal, if I hadn't made the right legal arguments, sometimes they could say, well, you didn't raise that issue, so you lose because you didn't raise it. And that's a fundamental fear that lawyers live with all the time, is that they don't make the argument correctly, and therefore you lose, not because you're not right on the law, but because you didn't make the argument correctly, which is one of our, like, this is the type of thing lawyers wake up in the middle of the night going, I didn't say that, and I should have said it. So that's what was kind of motivating me. And, I mean, you can tell I speak really fast, so I usually am able to get a lot of stuff into the judge. He wasn't letting me get anything in. And finally he says, like, I'm warning you. And I was a little confused, like, what are you warning me about? Like, what am I doing wrong except reading the record? So I said to him, I'm not clear. And literally he said, that's it. And I was in handcuffs and held in contempt. And it was so surreal. I had my phone in my hand. I was looking at my associate, Heather Younce, like, what is happening here? It was so weird. And they handcuffed me behind my back. The court officers, they were the nicest. I will not complain about the court officers at all. They were very, honestly, they didn't say anything, obviously, because they're professionals, but I certainly got the feeling that they were aghast at what was happening. And I'm walking down the hallway, being led down to lockup, this place that I've seen my clients for 25 years be led down this hallway. And I've walked with them for 25 years as they're going down the hallway. And I'm like,
a different experience, huh?
It's me. Like, I'm the one in handcuffs going down the hallway. And so the court officer was so nice. She kept saying, it's okay. You're going to be okay. It's okay. You're going to be okay. And of course, when my clients get arrested, it's a very different experience for them. They do not have someone telling them it's going to be okay, although they may sometimes, but they don't know if it's going to be okay. Like, I kind of instinctively knew it would be okay, but you still have the doubt whether you're going to be at Nashua Street that night or not.
So you were down in the lockup, in the courthouse? Right.
So we go downstairs. All the lawyers came down with me. People started desperately coming in and out of the holding cell area where I was in the area outside the holding cells. They kept coming down, trying to help. And eventually the court officer was like, you have too many lawyers down here. You can pick 3. Like, 3 lawyers, that's it.
Did they take the handcuffs off once you were down there?
They did take the handcuffs off, yeah. They were very respectful, I mean, I wasn't, the handcuffing part was jarring, to say the least. Like, my body started physically shaking at that point in time. And all I kept kind of thinking was, well, what about my kids? I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. I was like, all right, wait a minute, are their school stuff picked up? What time am I going to get out of here tonight? And, okay, and I realized my son didn't have school. So then I started thinking, I got to call my husband. And my husband happens to be a criminal defense attorney, but he also happens to be the immediate past chair of the Mass Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. So, and they have something called the Strike Force, which is the organization that hires lawyers to defend lawyers in exactly this situation. So I'm calling him, and he's not answering the phone. And I'm so mad. Like, why won't you answer the phone? And I realize he's at a funeral. And I was like, oh, crap, he's at this funeral because a friend of ours died. And anyway, so eventually he shows up. He's mad, man. Like, he's not coming down as my lawyer. He's coming down as my husband. And he sees me, and, it was very upsetting to him, too. Lots of people rushed to help. Like, I heard that a bunch of legal aid lawyers started a march to the courthouse to start a protest. John Swamley, who's a really great, he was my former supervisor in law school. He showed up to help. Many people. I'll forget names right now. But,
yeah. But then eventually, you were held several hours.
Yeah.
And then brought back up to Judge Sinnott's courtroom.
So I can't talk about it now, but some things happened downstairs that were, in my opinion, highly inappropriate. And then
You can't talk because it may
affect future issues with the case. But things happened. I go upstairs. My lawyers the entire time were preparing an emergency petition to the Supreme Judicial Court. And that was another interesting thing. So I'm a criminal defense attorney, and, honestly, like, sometimes I don't get time to call every single client back that calls me every day, and my immigration clients too. And, I'm downstairs for like an hour and a half. I don't know what's going on. And it was really stressful. I was like, I will never not call a client back like after today.
Right.
It's really hard to sit there and not know what's going to happen to you and whether or not I was going to go to South Bay that night or National Street. So I come upstairs, and we all decided I wasn't going to say anything when I came upstairs. And my lawyer, Max Stern, who was took the lead in this case.
Very well-known.
Great, and a great guy.
Defense lawyer here in
Great
Boston.
lawyer. Really a famous lawyer in his own right. Like, he deserves all the credit he gets. He was like, I'll do all the talking, and he spoke, and the judge said something like, well, she was passionately representing her client, so I'll let her go. Something like that, which is somewhat absurd, right? Yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm a lawyer. And I was let out, and there was like a horde of people waiting for me, which really eased the blow, I guess, to say. It was nice to have people there to support you.
So sort of, you described it as kind of surreal, the whole experience.
Yeah. My son found out through the babysitter. My son's 13. And so he was freaking out at home because he couldn't reach me or my husband, and was like Googling it and watching stuff online.
Right. So let's just take a little bit of a step back. This was, again, kind of fallout from this weekend demonstrations, which were themselves getting a lot of attention and controversy around, some people even saying that the counter-demonstrators, was counterproductive in terms of people arguing over whether to give attention to the straight pride parade itself. But leaving that aside, the issue of then how the cases are handled from the counter-demonstrators who got arrested has really seemed to have put a spotlight on a lot of tensions that have been percolating since the election of the new Suffolk County DA, Rachel Rollins. And she was certainly outspoken immediately on Tuesday when Judge Sinnott first made clear that he was not prepared to go along with or agree to these efforts by the prosecutors in DA Rollins' office to move for dismissal. And so, it was clear that there's something bigger going on here. What in your view, is this kind of exposing in terms of tensions or what things going on in the criminal justice system here in Suffolk County right now?
So, just to back up a little bit, I've defended protesters for many years. In fact, just today, the protesters who were arrested in Cambridge for protesting the tech company's involvement in ICE, all of their cases were not arraigned and nothing went forward. I represented the Occupy protesters. They were all dismissed. And they, occupied a park in Boston for, 3 months or something like that? All dismissed. It's always been the policy of the DA's office to dismiss protesters, even when it's a little bit above what you would expect at a normal protest, as the allegation is in this case, as to some of them. Not my client, but others.
And your client is, how old is your client?
You say that. I hardly had any time to talk to her.
Right.
She's in her late 20s, early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's about the protesters, exactly what you're saying. It's about their opposition to Rachel Rollins. Rachel Rollins was elected and has been doing a phenomenal job. Honestly, I was thinking about this today. I've just been waiting for her to disappoint me because she's a prosecutor, right? Like, I just expected to eventually be disappointed with her level of approach to reform in the criminal justice system, and she has yet to disappoint me. She has been amazing. And what she's doing is saying small level offenses that are not long-term issues, not violent, not, serious disruptions to the community, they will not be arraigned for people without criminal records, because even the fact of a simple arraignment can have lifelong consequences to somebody. For example, I have many clients who have charges pending. They can't apply for a job because a pending charge shows up on your court, even if you're found not guilty of it eventually. I mean, so she's recognized the damage the criminal justice system can do to people, and she's taking a prosecutorial decision that she was elected to do by the city of Boston, and she's implementing it. And it's absolutely within her legal rights, and it's 100% not within the legal right of a judge to impose his political view in opposition to that. And that's really what's going on.
So it seems like, to sort of borrow from your world, that he's sort of trying to litigate some of the sort of issues or political issues or things that the election, she keeps saying, voters made a decision about who they wanted in that office based on a pretty clear platform she put forward.
Right. She listed all the charges she would not prosecute were she to become elected before she was elected, and then she implemented that memo. And he doesn't have a right to override the voters. He doesn't have a right to override the will of the people. He's not allowed to be an activist judge in this situation.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing, you said you've represented a lot of demonstrators. I was struck by a comment that a vice president, Calderon of the Boston Police Patrolmen's Union, said to the Globe that her office really, in this case, wasn't acting that differently than her predecessors
He admitted
had.
that. He admitted that.
And,
that's right.
the quote in the Globe was, he said, "This DA's office is doing the same thing, but the judge on the bench has taken a different position."
Yeah, that's exactly. I'm happy he said that, actually, because that was really my point, too, that this is not something that is out of the ordinary at all. It's not unreasonable. And again, I've heard, although I don't know, that maybe some cases involving a low level of violence were dismissed on Tuesday, but all the cases on Wednesday were very specifically and thoughtfully delineated by the DA's office. I was given a list in the morning. There were 2 names at the top. Those people were not getting dismissed because they involved assault and battery on the police officer. They were getting arraigned, and they were going to have to go through the system.
Right.
The next list were people, which my client was included of. It was approximately 8. Every single one of them was slated to be null pros because they were within that nondescript police
Null
report.
pros is sort of a Latin term, right?
Right. They were to be null pros, straight out, no penalty, no nothing, because of the fact that there was nothing descript about them in the police report. So no throwing of rocks, no throwing of I've heard allegations, although I haven't seen it, of urine. It's important to understand, by the way, that for everything the protesters did, the allegation is that there was 2 hours of pepper spray by the Boston Police Department. And, I haven't verified this, but I read online that it wasn't all the Boston police, because I will say that in the past I felt like Boston police officers were certainly not perfect with dealing with protesters, but there's a level of respect with protests. They stay to the side. They respect the First Amendment rights of people. But in this case, there was 1 or 2 officers who were consistently and repeatedly doing the pepper spray, which caused a lot of the problems at the arrest. At any rate, the last list was people to be null pros, but only after completing 8 hours of community service. So there's a lot of thought put into this decision making.
Right. And if you're saying, that this sort of handling of the case by the DA's office actually is not that much of a departure at all from past practice, is it sort of do you think it's sort of he's using it as a proxy for, other policy changes she's talked about? It seems like in a way he's, even if he were going to wage a battle against her, he's sort of picking the wrong one to do. This isn't really an example of a sharp departure from the practices of her predecessors.
Right, and that's where I start, blaming Trump, right? Like, a lot of people joke about, like, quote unquote liberals blaming Trump, but it's the fact that this is a straight pride parade that also plays into this, which is part of this cultural war that's going on, between Trump and everybody else. And I feel like even if this was a different issue, if this was an environmental protest, I don't think we'd even have him acting the same way that he's acting now. I think it has to do with the larger issues of what's going on in our society. And again, I don't want to guess what the judge's motivation is. I don't know. But I feel like this would never have happened 3 or 4 years ago. There is a certain amount of decorum and respect that lawyers try to give judges in the courtroom and judges try to give lawyers in the courtroom that just was not happening today. And I've been, he said something to the effect of, I'm not expecting theater. I have been a trial lawyer since 1995. I've done high-profile cases on more than one occasion. Nothing's ever happened to me like this. I've never had this problem. And I've had judges dead wrong on the law before. And
right. I mean, I wasn't there to hear it. I mean, from the accounts of it, though, when there was this back and forth, I mean, the one thing I was struck by is the times I've been in courts, there is usually this kind of complete discretion to the judge that they really rule the room, and people don't tend to, if they're told, that's it, we'll hear no more from you, they tend to agree to that. Is that not the case?
I mean, if I had gotten what I feel like is an opportunity to make my case in just even a little bit more, literally I needed one more, 10 seconds more to say this one thing, maybe that would have been the end of it. But, the tape is the tape. It'll reveal what happened. I think it's pretty clear that, I was not happy with what he was saying and his refusal to violate the law. But I can tell you that if it had been a gray area legal argument, if we had been arguing about something that was unclear in the law or that he had sound discretion to make a decision against me, this wouldn't have happened. But he was so dead wrong on the law. And
have you appeared in his court before? Do you have any?
I believe
history?
I've been in front of him for minor things, but I don't remember any specific cases. I've seen his face before, I can't remember. But everyone's heard of his reputation. And I think it's really important to understand this isn't about me getting handcuffed and brought downstairs and held for 3 hours. This is about a judge who is abusing his power, who I've heard now other stories about this judge, and I think even more will come out about his treatment of African-American defendants. There was a comment about how he refused to use the real name of a transgender protester that was there. She said her pronouns, and he didn't want to use those. And I've heard of, I don't know if you know this, but the day before, a protester didn't want to take off his hat. He was handcuffed and put into custody. He upped the bail of people who voluntarily showed up in court. And there are other criminal defense attorneys who have contacted us who have said, this is just the tip of the iceberg with this judge, and he's acts unlawful on a fairly regular basis. And what happens to those defendants who don't have lawyers? I mean, I happen to be, my husband's the former chair of MACDL. I happen to have sued Trump in 2017 and have a lot of media contacts and stuff as a result. And media was called right away, and they showed up. Imagine the unpowerful in that situation.
And the case is now being taken to a justice of the Supreme Judicial Court.
Right.
The DA's office has filed a motion there. What do you think what do you think is going to happen there?
I believe it goes to Judge Graziano.
That's what I've read.
And he's a former prosecutor, and I think he will fully and 100% understand the law. And I haven't met a prosecutor yet who sides with the judge in this case, so I'm hoping that he will see the law and apply it as it clearly is.
I mean, I've seen it sort of termed that everything got turned upside down. I mean, you're sort of saying, in a way, that his background as a prosecutor or a defense lawyer, you might be a little concerned traditionally in cases going before a judge who served as a prosecutor. But in this case, you're saying you think that prosecutors, which in fairness, Judge Sinnott had served as one as well, but that prosecutors really understand well this issue of it's kind of a separation of powers, I guess, right, in the end, about who controls which aspects of judicial proceedings.
Right. It is separation of powers. And so that's one of the interesting questions. I forget where I read this, so I can't take credit for it. But somebody said, so he refuses to no prosecute. So who's going to prosecute the case? Because the prosecutors don't want to prosecute. What's going to happen when you go to pick a jury trial? Do prosecutors who are against prosecuting the case have to be forced to go forward on the jury trial. It was. I don't understand where he was going with the end of the case.
And there's obviously tensions now between the DA's office and the police department on issues. Do you sort of fear, sort of going forward, that this is kind of the one example, but that we're going to be seeing more cases where our justice system here in Suffolk County is going to be subject to a lot of tumult and these kind of cases?
Change is always painful. And I've been a criminal defense lawyer for 25 years. My first jury trial was a police brutality trial where my client was viciously beaten by David Williams, and an officer who's now been
Boston police officer.
He's been removed and put on back on the force 4 times now for excessive force related issues. Change is a really difficult thing. It causes a lot of problems. We as criminal defense lawyers, you ask all of us, we will say we've been seeing problems with police since we've been doing lawyers. And not that that's where Rachel Rollins is in the case, but we've seen the effects of mass incarceration. We've seen the effects of lives devastated by an arrest that was dismissed 1.5 years later for lack of probable cause. We saw the Annie Dukin scandal and all those defendants whose lives, they couldn't get jobs, they couldn't get housing, they couldn't get schooling, they couldn't get student loans because of a drug arrest. And come to find out it was fake drugs, fake tests. So whether or not people like the change that's coming about, change is always hard to project, and it's time for a change. And I think Rachel Rollins understands that very well, and she'll continue fighting.
Right. Well, I want to thank you so much, Susan Church, for coming in and talking to us.
Thank you so much.
And you've been listening to another episode of the Codcast from Commonwealth Magazine. I'm Michael Jonas. Thanks for listening.